much for tuning in to another episode of Rich Off Passion. I have another special guest here in the building with me. I have Dae Bogan, who is the head of third party partnerships at the MLC and also a former founder of Tune Registry and Royalty Claim. Thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. I appreciate being on your show.
I appreciate it as well. So let's just go ahead and get right into it. Before we talk about your work with the MLC, I would like to cover and just address and talk about your background in the music industry, as well as you being in LA. I know you're a transplant, correct? You
Right.
relocated
Cleveland,
from the Midwest.
from Cleveland, Ohio.
Okay.
So, that journey was a very interesting, ambitious journey. 17 years ago, moved to Los Angeles as a homeless and unemployed aspiring musician at 18 years old, a couple months after high school, and never looked back. Took that as the starting point for a very ambitious and assertive career projection for myself. I pivoted, of course, from being the talent to representing the talent. And then from there, going on to where I now work in academia and in the nonprofit space. And before that, obviously, the series of startups that I've developed in the music industry. But from the beginning, it was this passion to come to Los Angeles to pursue the music industry and acting on that passion at 18 years old.
Nice, nice. And you've been there ever since.
Ever since.
Okay.
Yep. The ups and downs, but ever since.
Okay. Now, was your goal was to move to LA to pursue a career in music, or okay?
Yeah. My goal was I always said I was wanting to be the next Will Smith, music, except for not rapper. Acting and music, that was my goal. When I was a student in high school, I pursued both. Had a passion for it, and wanted to come out to LA and pursue music and acting, and did that for a very, very short period of time. But I'm naturally a business person, naturally a type of person who likes to empower others, and kind of naturally moved into management when I was in college. And from there, just kind of grew to starting an independent label, to starting a publishing company, to obviously building tech companies in the music industry. So it's kind of just a snowball into this different direction, but a direction that I was equally as passionate about. And spent a lot of time investing in myself in those areas of music rights and publishing and so forth. So now, here I am, 17 years later, as a leader of one of the organizations in the United States representing songwriters and publishers for licensing, and having built a number of software companies that publishers and artists and managers use to manage their careers and their catalogs, and obviously teaching the next generation of music industry professionals at universities, as well as advising founders of other startups in the music industry on their path and their journey for launching. So,
okay, nice. Now, you mentioned that you founded quite a few different companies within the music industry. I would like to know, and I'm sure my audience would like to know as well, like, how did you select your team starting out? Because many of us struggle with that, bringing on good people to go the long route.
It's not easy, and it's certainly team building is a part of the skill that you have to develop as a founder. It's something I talk about in my class. I teach music industry entrepreneurship at UCLA, going into my 5th year teaching. And choosing your team, your co-founders, first and foremost, is a very important part of setting up for the success of your business. A lot of that has to do with understanding your strengths and weaknesses, and then finding individuals and meeting individuals who complement those strengths and weaknesses. Also, it's about giving up and basically creating fair opportunities for your founders. I've met so many founders in my experience consulting with and mentoring startups that only give their co-founders a small equity in their company because they want to hold on to as much as possible, thinking that if I hold on to as much equity as possible, I can control as much of the business as possible, or I can have a lot of equity to give up in the future if I need to do so. But the reality is, if you don't treat people fairly, they're not going to put as much effort in as you. So from the beginning, and the companies I've developed a number of companies in the music industry. in my senior year at UCLA, I started my first management company, managing DJs and producers. That grew into starting a record company because my producers work with LiveX.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a day job as a head of marketing of a retail chain. And then part of that job, I developed our music division and a multi-city talent search and developed a label for the winners to be signed to. And as I built these different companies, I brought people on my team who were passionate about the music industry, who were passionate about supporting artists, who meshed really well with me from a personality standpoint, who brought a set of skills to the table that were strong, and it gave them equal equity as myself. When I started my tech companies, I brought people on and gave them a fair equity, equal to myself, so that they felt as much ownership as I felt, or they had as much ownership as I had, and therefore felt as passionate about its success as I did. And that really, really helps to drive, to continue to drive on a path where everyone is giving it their all. If you bring someone on board and you give them 5% or 10%, that's how much effort they're going to give you.
Very true. Yeah.
If you give them the same amount of equity you have, they feel like a partner. They feel like they should. And they will, work their butt off just like you are. So I've always believed that don't be stingy with your equity when you're building a company. That also requires you to make sure you vet your people very well before you give up as much equity as you're going to give up. So it's a combination of making sure that you understand what your strengths and weaknesses are and what your needs are, and then making sure that you give people a reason to give their all to your business, which is going to be their business.
Right. Nice. When you started out, because as you mentioned earlier, you were young when you moved to LA, pursuing this career in the industry, building these companies. Once you transition into the business side of things, how were you able to get things started financially? Was this right out your pocket? You worked some odd jobs or what? How did you go about that?
I had regular. Well, I've always been entrepreneurial. Let me start that way. I've always been entrepreneurial, even in middle school, selling candy and cakes to my peers, to high school, developing. I had a kind of a travel shopping trip from Cleveland to New York that I put together and made money from, and other types of just business ideas. So I've always been entrepreneurial. I wrote a business plan when I was like 16 for a business that I still look at the business plan. It was great then, it's still great now. Nice. And so I've always been entrepreneurial. It comes from my family. My mom, started a business. My dad started businesses. So they were both entrepreneurs. My mom still had a day job. So when I was in college and undergrad at UCLA, I started with club promotions and event production. I was doing club promotions and event productions in college, and creating opportunities for student groups, creating opportunities for fraternities and sororities, creating just nightlife experiences for kind of the young adults in the Los Angeles area. And that was my business. I had a team that worked with me, sub promoters, event managers, door people. And I made money, pretty good money as a college student, doing events and promotions. That's how I got into managing DJs, because I booked DJs and then they wanted me to manage them. So I've always been entrepreneurial. And entrepreneurship doesn't always mean starting a business. Entrepreneurship means developing an idea into something that's monetizable. That can be done internally at a business as well. When I graduated from college, I got a full-time job as the head of marketing of a retail chain. But in that role, it was a very entrepreneurial role where I developed a number of initiatives internally in the organization, with the support of having a biweekly check. But I still developed initiatives. I developed more events. I developed our music division. I developed our street team unit. So those are taking concepts, building infrastructure around it, executing, building plans, and that's entrepreneurship. Now, when I started my first tech company and my label and my publishing company, I spent the money out of my own pocket. So it's all bootstrapped. So every business I founded was bootstrapped until I brought on an investor of some kind. And that's generally how it works. You kind of put your first money in, then you can raise money. We talk about friends and family round. then a seed round from angel investors, and then it goes, beyond that to
Mm-hmm.
institutional investments or strategic investments and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
But I started every business out of my own pocket. And that money came from working day jobs or, doing other consulting work
Mm-hmm.
to be able to generate income.
Okay. Cool. How did you stay motivated throughout those times? Because I'm pretty sure that you've been through it.
Yeah, you absolutely
Yeah.
been through it. I mean,
Yeah.
we talk about the successes, but I talk very publicly about my failures too. And you know that I
Yeah.
posted very publicly on social media. I think that's super important.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Entrepreneurship, especially a serial entrepreneur, does not come without failure.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the lessons you learn is through your failures or through
Mm-hmm.
your setbacks, not through your successes and
Mm-hmm.
accomplishments. Most of the lessons you learn is by going for something and then not quite reaching that goal. And you take that and you apply it to the next thing. Now you have to, identify something that you're passionate about in the first place, because
Mm-hmm.
without that passion driving you to continue going when you're not hitting the goals you want to get, you're going to burn out
Yeah.
and then stop doing it altogether.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been lucky enough to be able to work on projects that I was super passionate about, things that I would do for free, things that I did for free. When I had a day job and was able to fund my, my expenses and do these things on the side without making a significant income.
Okay.
Made some money, but nothing, not a primary income. So, identifying your passion, there's actually a concept that I teach in my class it's a Japanese concept called Ikigai. And it's about your purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really looking at this Venn diagram of different dimensions of your purpose, from things that you're good at,
Mm-hmm.
overlapping with things that you can get paid for, overlapping with things that the world needs,
Mm-hmm.
overlapping with things that you're passionate about, and finding, what fits those different criteria.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of helps you zoom into something that is not only you're passionate about, but you can, you have all these elements that if you hit all these dimensions, you're kind of in a sweet spot.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I feel like I am now in my career.
Yeah.
And it took the 17 years, it took more than 17 years. I would say it took 20 years, because I started, this path in high school, knowing
Mm-hmm.
that I wanted to come to Los Angeles. I wanted to pursue this. Actually, in middle school, I came home one day and told Mom, I was like, I'm moving to Los Angeles. I'm gonna do this. So I started the process of building this trajectory in middle school, and started to take action on it in high school, when I started to save money from my summer job to pay for my one-way ticket to Los Angeles. And
Mm-hmm.
so this path had been starting to pave itself early on, even though I didn't know where it would lead. What I do now is nothing I thought I would ever do, because it wasn't even a concept to me. It wasn't even my understanding of the music business.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew that I wanted to work in the music industry. I knew I wanted to work in Los Angeles. I knew I wanted to support, I wanted to be an artist, but also support the arts in different ways. And that's kind of what I've gotten to through different detours in the journey.
Nice. Good segue right into the MLC. So you are currently the head of third-party partnerships at the MLC. What is the MLC?
So the MLC stands for the Mechanical Licensing Collective, and it is a nonprofit organization that was designated by the U.S. Copyright Office last year to administer the new digital audio mechanical license. This license comes out of the Music Modernization Act that was passed in 2018. And it's basically a license to digital service providers like Spotify, Apple, Google, Amazon, Tidal, to enable them to be licensed to perform songs or to distribute and copy songs. So that's what the distribution right is in the license in the United States. So we represent songwriters and publishers. We license services. We will be licensing services because we began licensing January 2021. So we will be licensing services. We will be collecting mechanical royalties, accounting to songwriters and publishers, and then paying them out. We need songwriters and publishers to join so that they can register their songs, check their data, and be able to receive their payments. There's an eligibility for that, but that's the general purpose. Before the Music Modernization Act, the mechanical licensing process in the United States was and still is still very fragmented.
Mm-hmm.
We don't cover every type of use that requires mechanical license in the United States. We only cover interactive streaming. We cover digital downloads and
Mm-hmm.
limited downloads. So there's still other types of usage where we don't license,
Mm-hmm.
we'll not be licensing. And there's different types of users who we will not be licensing. But primarily our focus is on making sure that digital service providers are licensed and that we're collecting royalties on behalf of publishers and songwriters.
Okay. Big job. Big job. So
It
how did
is.
that position come about from, from your entrepreneurial route to here? How did
Yeah. So, as an entrepreneur, especially as someone who has a background in sales and marketing, because
Mhm.
prior to me starting music tech companies, I was the VP of marketing and strategic partnerships of a retail chain
Mhm.
where I developed and conceptualized strategic partnerships between our company and various brands from the music industry to film and TV to retail brands. Um, and so I've always been a strategic thinker, thinking about ways that I can create opportunities between two or more entities or people or organizations.
Mhm.
So that's strategic partnerships. As a founder of tech startups, where I'm out there promoting the business, trying to establish partnerships with other organizations to further our to expand our user base, to further our feature sets, or whatever the case may be. Um, you know, there's a fundamental kind of principles around strategic partnerships, understanding that both parties have to have some benefit, both parties have to have some consideration,
Mhm.
and there needs to be some real tangible effort, whether it's promotional or there's some ongoing initiative or partnership.
Mhm.
Um, so that's kind of a general background in terms of having experience developing partnerships. When it comes to the MLC, one of the important things that MLC is trying to do is connect itself or integrate itself into the music industry in a way that's very strategic.
Mhm.
And part of that is looking at the various technology companies that are supporting rights holders. I come from that world, having built rights tech startups.
Mhm.
I know a lot of other founders who are startup founders who built rights tech companies. I know a lot of executives at various music rights or metadata companies. And these are the type of companies that need to interface with MLC.
Mhm.
So I understand also the various issues that we're dealing with from a legal standpoint, from a practical standpoint when it comes to publishing and metadata and rights and royalties.
Mhm.
Having studied it both academically as well as studied it as an entrepreneur in terms of building solutions for these issues.
Mhm.
Um, and having worked with a number of startups as a consultant or a mentor through accelerators like Capital Music Group, Peachy Beta Music Tech, or South by Southwest Mentors, I have a kind of a very broad background that covers working with founders, working with startups, working with major enterprises to bring solutions to the table between two or more parties. So that's just a part of my role at MLC. There's other aspects of third-party partnerships that I've been developing. One of them, for example, is cultural partnerships,
Okay.
where I want to identify, we want to identify and elevate the stories of songwriters and emerging publishers who come from or who are part of historically marginalized group, Black music creators, Latinx music creators, Asian music creators, and LGBT music creators. That's an entire platform called Cultural Partnerships that I'm developing partnerships with right now. I have a platform called Innovation Partnerships, where I want to connect with the type of founders that are building innovative solutions for the rights administration community.
Mhm.
So for publishers and rights holders, and look at ways that we can, as organization, interface with them strategically, whether that's through building APIs, whether that's through establishing relationships where there's certain access to data. We have a mandate to provide access to our data to the public in general,
Mhm.
and I want to see how we can take that a step further so that it's more convenient for technology companies that are building solutions for the marketplace and who need access to our data. It's something that I experienced when I built Tune Registry and Royalty Claim, is looking for those type of opportunities with rights organizations. And then we have a platform that I'm building called Service-Oriented Partnerships, where I look specifically around education, how to educate the community, especially self-administered songwriters, on their rights, on their entitlements, on the processes for administering and defending their rights and entitlements. I've done that in the past by writing tons of articles on the topic. I've spoken on tons of panels. I wrote the ebook, The DIY Musician Starter Guide to Being Your Own Label and Publisher, which is sort of a checklist on setting themselves up in the United States. So all of this is all falls under my third-party partnerships, is reaching out to organizations and nonprofits and groups in different regions and different cities who are focusing on different types of niche music communities, whether it's hip hop, whether it's jazz, whether it's classical. It doesn't really matter the genre. We're in a process right now of talking to local, regional, and national organizations that are member focused and maybe focus on a particular through a particular lens of music creation. And these are creators who are going to need to join MLC and going to need to collect their royalties. And I want to look at how can we partner with these organizations to speak to them through those lenses, as opposed to just a generalized MLC lens.
Right. Okay. Cool. So let's go ahead and get right into some myths, because even before I brought you on, I was watching some interviews out there and I'm seeing people speaking on it. And after our conversation, I'm like, yep, they don't know what they're talking about. So I was really excited to have you on to really go over that and just clear the mud that's out there in regards to the type of royalties that you guys are covering and things of that nature. So my first question or myth that I would like us to dispel is, are distributors no longer paying out mechanical royalties?
So before we begin, I do want to say that the MMA, which is the legislation, where the MLC is basically born out of, has updated the Copyright Act. It's one of the most substantial updates in decades. And the mechanical licensing update is just one part, right? There's other parts of the MMA. There's Title II, Title III that has to deal with sound recordings and artists. So for Title I, which is the Musical Works Modernization Act, it's updating some parts of the way in which mechanical licensing happens in the United States. There's been a lot of misconceptions over the years, a lot of confusion over the last 2 years since it passed, because different parties and different bodies of organizations have different perspectives on the legislation itself, and then also on the existence of the MLC. So, there's definitely people out there that are making statements based on their understanding of things, which may be based on not really having access to all information, and simply just making their opinions fact. And that definitely hurts everyone when we're not putting out correct information. So our job at the MLC is to update the community, which we do on our website. We have a resources section, we have a news section where we put out information about what's going on. So with that, can you tell me your question once again?
Yep, no problem. Are distributors no longer paying out mechanical royalties?
Okay, so the distributors, nothing changes with distributors in regards to the MLC or the MA. So distributors are now have always been required to receive mechanical rights or reproduction rights, distribution rights through the person or the entity uploading a release before sending that release to a DSP. And then they pass those rights on to that DSP through the agreement between them and the DSP. For digital download stores like iTunes and other download stores, they've historically have paid distributor the mechanical royalties because it's in their direct license with their direct agreement with the distributor. So they will pass through the mechanical royalties to a distributor. Distributors are supposed to pay those mechanical royalties to the publishers or self-administered songwriters. That's been the process, and that process is not going to change. The MLC provides a blanket digital download license, which a DSP or a download store could get. In that case, they would be paying the mechanicals to us. But if a download store continues to operate under a direct license with distributor, then they'll be paying those download royalties to that distributor. So it really depends on the DSP, not the distributor or the MLC. If the DSP that has a download store chooses to use the blanket digital download license for a portion of their the works that they allow to be downloaded from the store, then those royalties will flow to the MLC. If they do the direct license with the distributor, then they'll continue to pay the distributor. We will receive information and reporting on the usage on downloads, but it doesn't mean that we'll receive the actual royalties. It depends on what license they're going to operate under, a blanket license to the MLC or a direct license with the distributor. Gotcha.
That definitely clears a lot. One last question along the lines of dispelling myths. Will black box royalties be given away to major publishers if unclaimed after 3 years?
So the legislation, the MMA, requires that the MLC spends a minimum of 3 years to match the historically unmatched or black box royalties. So unclaimed black box royalties are royalties that accumulate against the usage of musical works at DSPs that has not been paid out or not been collected by the proper rights holders. And there are many reasons why that happens. For example, a service could not know who the publisher is, and that could be because the work has not been registered. It could be because the service didn't do a good enough job of finding the publisher. The law requires a recipient of what's called a NOI, Section 115 NOI, who's going to use the compulsory mechanical license to only search the public records of the Copyright Office. So if you've never registered your song with the Copyright Office, and therefore it doesn't appear in the public records of the Copyright Office, then technically speaking, the Section 115 of the Copyright Act basically mandated that a person or entity that receives a compulsory license is not required to pay mechanical royalties until such time that the work has been registered with the Copyright Office and therefore available in the public records. But DSPs generally, in practice, would still accrue those mechanical royalties and hold them in sort of an escrow account, which we call the black box. There's other reasons why the mechanical royalties could fall into black box. There could be bad metadata where unique identifiers are not available to match the sound recordings to the musical works. There could be misspellings of names. It could be misspellings of titles. It could be unregistered works that are generating royalties, but the work doesn't appear in any rights database because it hasn't been registered by the rights holder. So many reasons why money can ultimately end up in this kind of black box. Come January, the MLC is supposed to receive all this black box or unclaimed royalties, and then we have a minimum of 3 years to match the sound recordings to the underlying musical work so that we can identify the rights holders and calculate and pay out those royalties. We've already begun that process, so we didn't wait to January to start trying to clean up the database and start matching sound recordings. We've already begun that process. So we have until February 2024. Okay. So February 2024. At that point, that would be the 3-year mark. But it's not our intention to just distribute the royalties at that point. Our intention is to continue to match the black box. So it could be 4 years, it could be 5, it could be 6, it could be 7, before we get to a point where we've matched as much as we can, and then there's some amount left over. At which point there's a distribution process. That process could be the processes that has been going on for a very long time, which is to distribute by market share. But that hasn't been decided on yet on what's going to happen yet. Our goal is to match as much as possible. So it's not to get the money out as fast as possible. It's to match as much as possible.
Gotcha.
And that means it could be much longer than 3 years.
Okay. Cool. Cool. Hopefully that cleared the mud for a lot of you out there, because I know a lot of people reached out to me, and I also saw people on other podcasts saying, yep, after 3 years they're going to give your money away, so
Well, I mean, the benefit of that misconception is that it should create a fear,
exactly.
and it should create a fear in people that makes them take action.
Yep.
Because if you're hearing that in 3 years your money's going to be given away, that means you have 3 years to register your works, to fix your metadata, to correct your address, to connect your bank account to the rights organizations, and not just MLC, because black box is not just mechanical royalties. There's black box royalties on the performance side. There's black box royalties on the sound recording side. So if you're an artist and you are receiving, you own your masters, there's royalties associated with that. So there's lots of black boxes. There's many black boxes, not just one. As a matter of fact, I built a software called Royalty Claim, which is the world's first search engine of black boxes. Not all of them, but some of them. So there's many black boxes out there. And like I said, there's many reasons why royalties end up in the black box. A lot of it has to do with the registering works and having complete and accurate metadata. By focusing on making sure that your catalog is registered and making sure that your data is updated, you start to reduce the instances of your royalties potentially flowing into the black box, because your rights will be properly, or you'll be properly accounted to. There's still some scenarios where a black box can occur even for properly registered works, and that has to do with what I call technology decay. You have systems that have been operating for many years. You're talking about billions of lines of data. Updates to those systems could create corruptions in data files. It could create if you have titles that are weird characters, those characters can potentially create issues in terms of matching. So there's lots of different things that technologists in the rights data space are addressing, that has to do with infrastructure, has to do with data, has to do with code. But at the end of the day, a rights holder is responsible. It's your money, right? It's your money that's being generated. It's your job to figure out how to collect it. And that collection starts with your administration, to register your works, to distribute your metadata. That's why I built Tune Registry. It was a one-stop shop to register works, to build, to distribute metadata in the United States. I found that as a problem that I had as a small publisher, as a small label owner, and as an artist manager. And in the early 2010s, late 2000s, early 2010s, is I was representing songwriters and artists, and I had a small label, had a small publishing company, I had an artist management company. I dealt with the same issues that thousands of people are dealing with, and that's why I built this solution, to be able to organize my metadata, to register my works efficiently through one system, to distribute the metadata associated with the sound recordings to the various metadata companies that then populate the metadata in DSPs and audio devices and other types of companies' services. So it's important to make sure you register your works, make sure you're collecting your metadata and distributing it, and that's going to help reduce the black box issue.
Totally agree with you. And that's how I took it too, the whole 3 years conversation. Like, this should light a fire up under you guys to
3 years is not a max, it's a minimum. And that's what we understand. The MLC doesn't have 3 years max to match. We have 3 years minimum to match. So come February 2021, that's the least amount of time that we have to match. We can continue matching onward for as long as as we think we need to, before we get to a point where we feel like we've combed the earth. And if we can't find you, you simply have not made yourself known. And there are cases. There's people who create songs right now and just upload it via service. They're not members of any rights organization. They don't register their copyrights. They don't register their songs. They don't properly label it. They have no metadata. But yeah, you're probably not going to get royalties. because you don't have any of the things that are set up to properly be accounted to. And to those individuals, they have to be educated about this issue, which is why I wrote the DIY Musician Starter Guide to being your own label and publisher, which is why I built a software company, which is why I teach at not only UCLA, but master classes at other universities, which is why I speak at panels and do workshops and webinars and so forth. Is that I'm trying to educate creators and rights holders on, their responsibilities. At the end of the day, it's your responsibility. It's your copyrights. It's your money. It's your responsibility. The way that the music industry works is that a lot of your income flows through other parties, and those parties need the information. If you're not providing the information, then those parties can't match your money to you, and then they can't pay you.
Exactly. Now, before I go on and we wrap up with the last question, is there anything else you want to get out in regards to the MLC?
Yes, I think it's important that songwriters, especially self-administered songwriters, understand the eligibility to join the MLC. So to join the MLC, you need to be, if you're a songwriter, you need to have ownership of your ownership of your copyrights in your musical works, meaning the song, the composition, the music, lyrics, and so forth. You need to have not signed a publishing deal. So if you sign a publishing deal, that means you've given the copyright ownership to a publisher, or you've at least assigned the administration rights to a publisher. Administration rights is the right to register a song and to collect royalties. And if you've done that, then you may not be eligible to join the MLC. If you have a publishing administrator like a Song Trust or TuneCore Music Publishing or CD Baby Pro or Centric, any of these publishing administrators who represent songwriters for registering their songs and collecting the royalties, then again, you may not be eligible because you're not self-administered if you give your administration rights to a third party. So it's important before trying to join the MLC is to check with any company or organization that you've signed a publishing deal with or hired as a publishing administrator to see if they're representing your works. Now there are cases where you may have a publishing administrator and or a publisher representing a portion of your catalog, and then you still represent a portion of your catalog. In that case, then you may be eligible to join the MLC. You can contact support@themlc.com and talk about scenarios. So for example, if I have 100 songs and 50 of those songs are represented by a publisher, and the other 50 songs, I still maintain ownership and still maintain administration rights, then I could potentially be a member of the MLC for those 50 songs while my publisher is representing the other 50 songs. So it really depends on your unique scenario. In general, if you're a self-published songwriter and you own 100% of your copyrights and you are responsible for registering your own works and collecting your own royalties without using a sub-publisher, without using a publishing administrator or a publisher, then you are eligible to join the MLC as a self-administered songwriter.
Okay.
Publishers, administrators, CMOs from other territories are all eligible to be members of the MLC.
Okay. Cool. So last question. What advice would you give to younger creatives who have no time and less responsibilities on their side? Kind of like you when you moved to LA. What advice would you give the young Dae?
Well, as a music creator, you have to understand that if you want to work in the music business, so you can be a music creator and never work in the music business, right? That's a hobbyist, right? Anyone who likes to sing or write songs and perform those songs for their family or friends, anyone can do that. Music creation is an art. It's a craft. It doesn't require you to monetize it. Just like I can paint at home all day and all night and never put it in a gallery or try to sell it. I'm not in the art business. I'm simply an artist. So you can be a music creator and not operate in the music business. Once you decide that you want to operate in the music business, meaning you want to commercialize and monetize your music, you want to upload it to a service where people in the world can listen to it and therefore generate royalties, well, you've decided to enter the music business. You've decided to become an entrepreneur. And if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you have to understand how your business operates. Like I can't start a pizza restaurant just because I like to make pizzas. I have to also learn how to do accounting and hire employees and run the books and clean the clean and get certain permits and licenses. It's a
Mhm.
business.
Mhm.
So you can be a music creator and never enter the music business. But the moment you want to enter the music business, you have to understand how that business operates, and then you have to operate accordingly. So to young creators out there who want to become the next big artist, well, those artists are all entrepreneurs, and they earn income, and they have a team in place. Just like if I started a restaurant, I have to hire a restaurant manager. If I'm an artist, I have to hire an artist manager. If I have a restaurant, I might try to hire a publicist to promote my restaurant. If I'm an artist, I might hire a publicist to promote my music.
Mhm.
If I'm going to have a team of people who are working in my restaurant every day to connect with customers and to get my food out, well, the same thing in terms of marketing and promotion as an artist. Like it's an infrastructure.
Mhm.
But it also means that if I'm a restaurant, I have to understand how to collect money from my customers, how to pay my bills, how
Yep.
to pay taxes, how to save for a rainy day. Same thing with music. You need to understand how to collect your royalties from listeners. Well, that in our music business, in our particular industry, those royalties flow through systems, and you have to understand that system. Whether it's a PRO like ASCAP, BMI, or CSEC that's collecting performance royalties, whether it's the MLC, which is collecting mechanical royalties, whether it's Sound Exchange, which is collecting royalties for the performance of the sound recording, whether it's AFM and SAG-AFTRA Fund collecting royalties for the non-featured artists, which are vocal session musicians and background vocalists. That's how our royalties flow. So understanding how our royalties flow from your customers, meaning listeners,
Mhm.
is important. So you don't have to get into that business if you don't want to, but
Yeah.
if you want to, then you have to understand how the business operates. There's no business you can operate without knowing how it works. You'll fail immediately. Your restaurant will close. You have no money and no customers. So in the music business, it's no different. You have to understand that it's a business. You're an entrepreneur, a music entrepreneur, and your creation is your product. Your art, your music is your product that you're selling, and you have to learn how to promote it. You have to learn how to engage and build a fan base around it, and learn how to monetize it.
Nice. Perfect. Perfect. Yeah, I had that conversation quite a bit with artists. Like
Mhm.
it's a hobby to them, and that's fine if it's a hobby. But if they want to make it a business, they have to realize that they are the owner, they're the entrepreneur. They got to understand how the business flow. So
Right.
nice. Appreciate
Yeah.
it. So where can people find you?
So on social media, I'm at Dae Bogan Music. So DAEBOGANMUSIC. On Instagram, on Twitter, you can find me at Dae Bogan Music. Same thing on Facebook. My Facebook page is at Dae Bogan Music. Feel free to connect with me on those socials.
Cool, cool. Well, thank you so much, Dave, for coming on the Rich Off Passion
Absolutely.
podcast. Greatly appreciate it. Such a wealth of knowledge. So yeah, if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out today or myself.
I want to mention again the
Yep.
MLC. If you want to have any questions for the MLC, feel free to reach out to support@themlc.com. You can also get to the MLC's on social media, on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter, on LinkedIn as well. But support@themlc.com. We have a team of people who are available Monday through Saturday. So we have lots of people ready to answer questions.
For sure, for sure. And no need to write this down. I'll include all the links that we mentioned down below in the description. So, yeah, with that being said, thank y'all for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys in the next episode. Peace.